The air over Lake Astaire on that Tuesday morning in early June was a perfect, crystalline thing, still cool from the night and smelling of damp earth and pine. Adam Rogers, 42 years old and 3 months into his hard-won retirement, sat on the edge of his private dock, a simple wooden structure that was the main reason he'd bought the modest cabin behind him. A ceramic mug of black coffee warmed his hands. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of water against the pilings and the distant, territorial call of a loon. This, he thought, was the antithesis of his old life, a life of billable hours, hostile depositions, and the ceaseless, grinding pressure of corporate law. This was peace. The sound that broke the stillness was not the roar of an engine, but the quiet, electric whir of a golf cart. It came to a stop at the edge of his property line, where a small, manicured patch of common area met the wilder growth of his yard. A young man, barely out of his teens, stepped out. He wore a polo shirt with a crisp Lakeside Management Partners logo embroidered on the chest, pleated khaki shorts, and an expression of profound discomfort. In his hand, he held a clipboard and a smartphone. Adam watched, unmoving, as the young man hesitated, clearly wrestling with a script he'd been given. Finally, with a sigh that carried across the 50 feet of lawn separating them, he began walking toward the dock. "Good morning," the young man said, his voice straining for a cheerful authority it didn't possess. He stopped a polite 10 feet from the dock. "Mr. Rogers." "That's me," Adam replied, his voice calm. He'd spent 2 decades facing down attorneys far more intimidating than this boy. "Can I help you?" "My name is Kevin. I'm with Lakeside Management, the property management company for the Heritage Point Homeowners Association." He gestured vaguely at the lake. "I'm here about this." "This being my dock?" Adam asked, taking a slow sip of coffee. "Well, more the unapproved personal items on the dock," Kevin said, his eyes darting to the simple, wooden Adirondack chair Adam was sitting in, and the fishing equipment. He held up his phone. "I just need to take a few photos for our records." Adam set his mug down on the weathered wood beside him. The piece was already beginning to fray. "Records for what?" "Kevin." Kevin consulted his clipboard, his finger tracing a line of text. "It's about maintaining the aesthetic harmony of the community's visual corridors. As per the community-wide standards, temporary structures and recreational equipment must not impede the natural lake views from common areas." He looked up, a flicker of apology in his eyes. "I'm really sorry to bother you. The president of the board, Ms. Scott. She asked me to come document the situation." Adam knew enough about HOA governance to recognize the anemic authority of a property manager. They were contractors, hired guns who did the board's bidding. The real power lay with the 5 volunteer homeowners on the board of directors, and, by the sound of it, primarily with its president. "Kevin," Adam said, his tone still even, "I appreciate you're just doing your job, but let me save you some time." He stood up, his joints creaking a little in the morning chill. "My property line, according to the deed recorded with the county, extends 15 feet from the shoreline into the water. This dock, this chair, and my fishing rod are all located on my private property, my deeded lot. They are not in the common area." He pointed to a small, almost invisible metal stake in the grass. "A surveyor's marker. The common area ends right there. The view corridor rules, as you call them, typically apply to common areas, not private lots." Kevin looked from the stake to his clipboard, his brow furrowed in confusion. The logic was simple, the kind that ended most rational disputes before they began. But Adam could see the young man was trapped between fact and instruction. "I, My work order just says to document the items on the dock at 114 Willow Trace. Kevin stammered. He raised his phone and, with another apologetic shrug, snapped several pictures of the chair, the fishing rod, the small tackle box. Each click of the digital shutter felt like a small, bureaucratic intrusion. "Do you need a copy of my property survey?" Adam offered, keeping any hint of irritation out of his voice. "I have it in the house. It clearly delineates the lot lines." No. That's okay," Kevin said quickly, already backing away. I'll add your comments to my report. The management office will be in touch if there are any further questions." He practically jogged back to his golf cart, leaving Adam alone on the dock. The sun had risen higher, its warmth now touching his face. But the crystalline peace of the morning was gone, replaced by a familiar, unwelcome tension in his shoulders. He picked up his fishing rod, but the desire to cast a line had vanished. The polite, clipboard-wielding boy was just a messenger. But a message had clearly been sent. This wasn't a mistake. It was a warning shot, fired across the manicured lawn of Heritage Point. And Adam knew, with the weary certainty of a man who had spent his life in conflict, that this was only the beginning. The next few days passed in a deceptive quiet. Adam forced himself to settle back into his new rhythm, a conscious effort to reclaim the tranquility that had been so briefly disturbed. He spent his mornings on the dock, the Adirondack chair, a silent symbol of his benign defiance. He told himself the incident with Kevin was a simple overreach, a case of an overzealous board president who would be corrected by the property management company's more level-headed lawyers. He'd seen it 100 times in his career. A layperson gets a taste of power and misunderstands its limits. Usually, a single, professionally written letter was enough to resolve it. His life at Heritage Point was meant to be an escape from that world. For 20 years, he'd been a partner at a Chicago firm specializing in complex corporate litigation. He'd dismantled companies, defended against hostile takeovers, and argued in boardrooms where billions of dollars hung on the precise interpretation of a contractual clause. The work had earned him a small fortune, but it had cost him his marriage and, nearly, his health. The burnout had been a slow, creeping thing, a gradual erosion of his soul that left him waking at 3 a.m., with his heart pounding, his mind racing through deposition strategies. His doctor had been blunt: change your life, or your life will be cut short. The divorce had been amicable, but financially brutal, cleaving his net worth in half. This small cabin on Lake Astaire, 200 miles from Chicago, was what remained of his dream of a grand lakeside estate. But he'd found he preferred it. It was simple, manageable. It was a place to heal. On Saturday, he met his next-door neighbor, Mike Johnson, a man about his age with a friendly, open face and the perpetually harried look of a father of 2 young children. Mike worked from home in IT, and he approached Adam while he was struggling with a new gas grill in his backyard. "The trick is to turn the gas on for a full minute before you hit the igniter," Mike said, leaning over the fence that separated their properties. "These things are temperamental." They fell into easy conversation. Mike was the community's emotional barometer, a decent, well-meaning man who kept up with neighborhood news. He spoke glowingly of Heritage Point, the great schools, the 4th of July block party, the general sense of safety and order. "The HOA is pretty active, but mostly in a good way," Mike explained, unaware of Adam's recent encounter. "Christina Scott, the president, she's a real go-getter, a bit intense. Maybe, but she keeps the property values up, organizes everything." "I think I had a run-in with her indirectly," Adam said, deciding to test the waters. He recounted the story of Kevin and the clipboard. Mike winced in sympathy. "Oh, yeah, that sounds like Christina. She's very particular about the lakefront, calls it the community's crown jewel. A few years back, she made the Millers take down a rope swing their kids had put up on a tree in their own yard because she said it impacted the natural aesthetic. Don't take it personally. She's like that with everyone. The advice was meant to be reassuring, but it had the opposite effect. It confirmed that Christina Scott was not just making a mistake. She was a serial overreacher. 3 days after the incident with Kevin, the first official communication arrived. It wasn't a certified letter or a formal notice, but an email from Lakeside Management Partners with the subject line, Friendly Reminder Community Standards, 114 Willow Trace. Dear Mr. Rogers, this email serves as a courtesy notice regarding items observed on your property that are not in compliance with the Heritage Point CC&Rs. During a routine community inspection on June 5th, a representative noted the presence of unauthorized temporary structures, one chair, and recreational equipment, fishing gear on the dock area of your lot. As per the community's governing documents, all items that may be visible from the common areas must adhere to aesthetic guidelines designed to preserve the natural beauty and harmonious appearance of our community. Specifically, such items can be seen as impeding the designated view corridors of the lake. We kindly request that you remove these items when not in active use. This is just a friendly reminder, and no fine has been assessed at this time. We appreciate your cooperation in keeping Heritage Point beautiful. Sincerely, Lakeside Management Partners. Adam read the email twice. The language was a masterpiece of corporate passive aggression, polite, reasonable, and utterly baseless. It cited no specific rule or CC&R section. It twisted the concept of view corridors to apply to his private property, and it presented its demand as a kindly request. He scoffed, a short, humorless sound. This was an amateur's attempt at intimidation. He typed a brief, professional reply. To whom it may concern. Thank you for your email. Please be advised that the items in question are located on my private, deeded property and not within a common area. The governing documents do not grant the association the authority to regulate the placement of personal items, such as a single chair, on a homeowner's private dock. If you believe I am in violation of a specific, recorded covenant, please cite the exact article and section of the CC&Rs. Otherwise, I consider this matter closed. Regards. Adam Rogers, 114 Willow Trace. He hit send and felt a sense of finality. He had responded with facts and a clear request for legal justification. Any competent management company would review his response, consult the CC&Rs, and advise their board president to stand down. He dismissed the email from his mind, confident he had extinguished the small fire before it could spread. He spent the rest of the afternoon sanding a piece of reclaimed oak in his workshop, the scent of sawdust filling the air, the hum of the orbital sander a soothing balm. He had followed the rules of engagement. He had been logical. He believed, foolishly, that logic would prevail. A week later, the mail carrier's truck lingered at his mailbox longer than usual. Adam watched from his kitchen window as the carrier filled out a small slip, attached it to a lime green envelope, and placed it inside. He knew before he even walked down the driveway what it was. Certified mail. The universal symbol for this is no longer a friendly conversation. His heart sank. It was a physical sensation, a cold weight settling in his stomach. The fight he had tried to avoid was now being delivered to his doorstep, requiring a signature. Back in his kitchen, he slit the envelope open with a knife. The letter inside was printed on heavy, cream-colored bond paper, embossed with the Heritage Point HOA logo. The tone was no longer polite. Official notice of violation. Date, June 15th. To Adam Rogers. 114. Willow Trace. From the Heritage Point, HOA Board of Directors, RE Violation of Covenants. Conditions and Restrictions, CC&Rs. This letter serves as a formal notice of a violation of the Heritage Point CC&Rs. An inspection of your property, conducted on June 5th and confirmed on June 14th, has found your lot to be in non-compliance with the community's governing documents. Violation: unauthorized structure, affecting common vistas. Relevant CC&R clause. Article the 8. Section 8.4.2. No structure, planting, or other material shall be placed or permitted to remain upon any lot which may damage or interfere with any easement for the installation or maintenance of utilities, or which may unreasonably change, obstruct, or retard direction or flow of any drainage channels, or which may materially obstruct the view or vista from any common area. Corrective action required. Immediately remove the unauthorized temporary structure, one Adirondack chair, and all associated recreational equipment from the dock area. Deadline to cure. You have 14 days from the date of this notice to bring your property into compliance. The deadline is June 29th. Penalty for non-compliance failure to cure the violation by the specified deadline will result in an initial fine of 100 dasirs, with additional fines of $25. €0 per day for each day. The violation continues thereafter. The audacity was breathtaking. They had found a vague, catch-all clause in the CC&Rs and were attempting to weaponize it. The phrase materially obstruct the view or vista was subjective legal quicksand, designed to give a board broad, discretionary power. His single, low-profile chair did not materially obstruct anything. It was a ridiculous, bad-faith interpretation of the rule. Adam felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, followed immediately by a profound sense of exhaustion. This was what he had left behind: the semantic games, the procedural posturing, the manufacturing of conflict where none should exist. All he wanted was to drink his coffee and fish. But Christina Scott was not going to let that happen. He walked into his small home office, the room he had set up but barely used, and pulled out the thick binder of documents he'd received at closing: title report, deed, property survey, and the one he was looking for: the covenants, conditions, and restrictions for the Heritage Point Homeowners Association. It was a dense, 80-page document filled with legalese. He found Article 8, Section 8.4.2. They had quoted it correctly. But as he read the surrounding sections, he saw what any first-year law student would recognize as a pattern of overreach. The document gave the Architectural Control Committee (ACC), a committee chaired, he would later learn, by Christina Scott herself, the power to approve or deny almost any external change to a property, from paint colors to mailboxes. It was a blueprint for a petty tyranny. The certified letter was a declaration of war. It was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate, calculated challenge. Christina Scott had escalated from a polite email to a formal, fine-bearing violation notice. She was daring him to fight back, banking on the assumption that he, like most homeowners, would find it easier to simply move the chair than to engage in a protracted, expensive battle with his HOA. Most homeowners would have folded. They would have sighed, cursed the HOA under their breath, and complied. It wasn't worth the trouble. But Christina Scott had made a critical miscalculation. She had assumed Adam Rogers was most homeowners. She did not know that he had spent the last 20 years of his life taking on bullies who used procedural rules and bad faith interpretations to get what they wanted. She did not know that while he was weary of fighting, he was biologically incapable of backing down from a fight he knew he was right to wage. He sat down at his desk, the anger and exhaustion solidifying into cold resolve. He pulled out a legal pad and began to write. He wasn't just going to fight the violation. He was going to take apart the entire rotten structure that allowed a person like Christina Scott to wield this kind of power. The battle for the Adirondack chair was over. The war for Heritage Point had just begun. Adam knew that responding with another letter would be pointless. The formal violation notice was a procedural move designed to push him into the next phase of the process, a hearing. According to the bylaws included in his closing documents, a homeowner had the right to appeal a violation notice before the board or its designated committee. 2 days after receiving the certified letter, he received a follow-up email. This time, a notice of hearing. It informed him that his case would be heard by the Architectural Control Committee via Zoom in 10 days' time. He prepared for the hearing as he would for a legal deposition. He reread the CC&Rs, highlighting not just Section 8.4.2, but every clause pertaining to ACC authority, private property rights, and the board's fiduciary duties. He prepared a concise, 2-page summary of his position, complete with high-resolution photographs of his dock from the common area, demonstrating the negligible impact of his chair on the vista. He included a copy of his official property survey map. His argument was simple, factual, and legally sound. He expected the hearing to be a formality, a chance to present his evidence to rational people who would see the absurdity of the situation and dismiss the violation. The evening of the hearing, he sat at his desk, dressed in a collared shirt, his documents neatly arranged beside his laptop. When he logged into the Zoom meeting, 4 faces appeared in a grid. 3 of them were older residents he recognized from around the neighborhood. They looked bored and slightly confused. The 4th was Christina Scott. She sat in what appeared to be a home office, a bookshelf lined with leather-bound volumes behind her. Her expression was one of serene, unassailable confidence. A small digital gavel icon was next to her name. She was chairing the meeting. "Good evening, everyone," Christina began, her voice smooth and practiced. "This is a hearing of the Architectural Control Committee for Heritage Point. We are here to consider the appeal of a violation notice issued to the owner of 114 Willow Trace, Mr. Adam Rogers. Mr. Rogers, you are present." "I am," Adam said. "Excellent," she continued, a tight smile on her face. "As per our bylaws, you will have 5 minutes to present your case. The committee will then have an opportunity to ask questions, after which we will deliberate and render a decision. You may begin when ready." Adam calmly presented his case, sharing his screen to display the documents. He walked them through the property survey, pointed out the specific language of Section 8.4.2, and showed the photographs. "As you can see," he concluded, "my chair is on my private property and does not constitute a material obstruction of the view from any common area. This application of the rule is unreasonable and exceeds the authority granted to the association in the governing documents." He finished with 10 seconds to spare. There was a moment of silence. One of the older committee members, a man named George, cleared his throat. "Well, it seems pretty clear to me. The chair is on his property. I don't see what the big deal is." Christina shot George a look that could have frozen water. "Thank you for your input, George. However, the interpretation of what constitutes a material obstruction is at the sole discretion of the Architectural Control Committee. That is the authority granted to us by the CC&Rs, which every homeowner agrees to upon purchase." She turned her attention back to Adam on the screen. "Mr. Rogers, are you aware that Heritage Point is marketed as a premier lakeside community, and that unobstructed lake views are a key component of our property values?" "I'm aware that I purchased a home with a private dock," Adam countered. "Are you suggesting that no homeowner is allowed to place a chair on their own deck or dock?" "I am suggesting," Christina said, her voice dripping with condescension, that the community has a vested interest in maintaining the pristine, natural aesthetic that all residents enjoy. Your permanent installation detracts from that aesthetic. It's a wooden chair, Ms. Scott. It's not a permanent installation. I move it frequently. It has been observed in the same location on multiple occasions, she snapped back, abandoning her pretense of calm. It constitutes a semi-permanent structure. The argument was so ludicrous that Adam was momentarily speechless. He watched as Christina addressed the other committee members. The issue here is not one chair. It is about precedent. If we allow one homeowner to ignore the aesthetic standards, where does it end? Will we have mismatched plastic furniture, brightly colored umbrellas, and cluttered docks lining our beautiful lakefront? We must uphold the standards for the good of the entire community. Her speech was persuasive, playing on the common suburban fear of declining property values. The other two members, who had looked ambivalent before, now nodded along, their expressions hardening. "I'd like to call for a vote," Christina announced, cutting off any further discussion. "All in favor of upholding the violation notice as issued." She raised her hand. After a moment's hesitation, the other two members slowly raised theirs. George kept his hand firmly down, shaking his head in disgust. The motion carries. 3-1, Christina declared, a triumphant gleam in her eye. "Mr. Rogers, the violation is upheld. You have until June 29th to cure, after which fines will commence as detailed in the notice. Thank you for your time. This hearing is adjourned." She clicked a button, and the Zoom meeting ended abruptly, leaving Adam staring at his own reflection on the blank screen. He sat there for a long time, the silence of his office pressing in on him. The sham hearing was a complete railroad job. Christina had controlled the proceedings, twisted the facts, and manipulated the committee. Logic had not won the fight. It had never even been invited. He had expected a bureaucratic hurdle. What he had found was a wall named Christina Scott. He now understood with absolute clarity that this wasn't about a chair or a view. He didn't know what her real motive was, but it was powerful enough for her to subvert the association's own processes to target him. Arguing with her, presenting evidence, appealing to reason, it was all useless. She wasn't interested in being fair. She was interested in winning. A cold, familiar fire began to burn in his gut. The weariness of the retired lawyer fell away, replaced by the focused anger of the litigator. He had tried to resolve this peacefully, through the proper channels. That had failed. Now, it was time to fight this on a different battlefield. He wasn't going to fight her rules anymore. He was going to find out why she was so obsessed with his small patch of land. And he was going to use the truth as a weapon she couldn't control. His lawyer brain, the part of him he had tried to put to sleep, was now wide awake. And it was hungry. The next morning, Adam's exhaustion was gone, replaced by a singular, energizing focus. Christina Scott had made this personal. She had used the HOA's power not to govern, but to harass, to win. Adam knew he couldn't just be a homeowner. He had to become an investigator. He wasn't fighting a violation anymore. He was building a case. His first call was not to a lawyer, but to a man he'd used once on a complex land use case in rural Illinois. Tom Stone was a retired county surveyor, a cantankerous old-timer who viewed property records as sacred texts and HOAs as a modern form of serfdom. For a flat fee, Tom would dive into the dusty, labyrinthine archives of county recorders' offices and uncover the history of a piece of land with the obsessive pride of a master detective. "An HOA president trying to claim your private dock is obstructing a view corridor," Tom grumbled over the phone, the sound of crackling paper in the background. "Sounds about right." These people think a three-ring binder of bylaws gives them sovereign authority. What's the parcel number? While Tom began his deep dive into the county's historical records, Adam started his own investigation. He spent the next week methodically dissecting the Heritage Point HOA. He downloaded every document available from the community's clunky, password-protected website bylaws, budgets, and years' worth of monthly meeting minutes. Most of it was mind-numbingly dull discussions about mulch, pool maintenance, and holiday decoration contests. But as he sifted through the documents, a pattern began to emerge. Christina Scott's name was everywhere. She had served as president for 6 consecutive years, an unusually long tenure. Under her leadership, the HOA's legal budget had tripled, and a new line item for lakefront management and enhancement had appeared 3 years ago, growing steadily each year. Then he found his first concrete clue. In the minutes from a board meeting held 6 months ago, just before he had purchased his cabin, was a heavily redacted section. The board entered into executive session at 8:15 p.m. to discuss sensitive development negotiations concerning the lakefront area, citing the need to protect the association's legal and financial interests during ongoing discussions. The details of the session are redacted as per Bylaw 4.7 discussions of pending legal matters. The session was adjourned at 9:30 p.m. No motions were made in open session. Sensitive development negotiations. The phrase leaped off the page. It was a tantalizing breadcrumb. Why would an HOA be involved in development negotiations, and why would they be so secret as to require redacting the official record? A few days later, Tom Stone called back, his voice buzzing with the thrill of discovery. Adam, you're not going to believe this. I pulled the original subdivision plat map from 1968, the one all the current deeds are based on. Your lot isn't just lakefront. It's special. Special, how? Adam asked, leaning over his kitchen counter, a pen poised over a legal pad. When the developer, a guy named Henderson, first carved up this land, he needed to guarantee lake access for all the lots, not just the ones touching the water. So he created a primary access easement. It's a 50-foot wide strip that runs along the shoreline, granting legal ingress and egress to the lake for the entire subdivision. And Adam. Tom paused for dramatic effect. The dominant tenement for that entire easement, the piece of land that controls it, is your parcel. Your deed doesn't just give you a dock. It gives you legal control over the single, most important legal instrument governing this community's lake access, without passage over your easement. Technically, no one else has a guaranteed legal right to get to the water. Adam felt a jolt of adrenaline. This was the kind of obscure, buried detail that won cases. His property wasn't just a piece of the puzzle. It was the cornerstone. Christina's obsession with his small plot of land suddenly started to make a terrifying amount of sense. It wasn't about his chair. It was about his power. But that's not all, Tom said, his voice dropping. I looked into the chain of title. The previous owner, an elderly man named Arthur Gable, passed away 2 years ago. The property sat in probate for over a year. During that time, someone filed a query with the county zoning office about the possibility of extinguishing and replatting the Henderson easement. The name on the query, Christina Scott. The pieces were clicking into place. Christina had known about the easement's power before the cabin was even on the market. She had been planning something, and his purchase had thrown a wrench into her machine. His third clue came from a call to an old colleague from his law firm, who now specialized in real estate law. Adam explained the situation and read him Article 8, Section 8.4.2, the View Corridor Clause. Adam. That's a classic vagueness trap. His friend, David, explained. But in this state, it's practically unenforceable without two things: a specific definition of material obstruction in the bylaws, which you've said they don't have, and, more importantly, a designated view corridor, officially recorded on the subdivision plat map. It has to be a surveyed, legally defined area. They can't just declare a view exists from a random patch of grass. Did your man Stone see anything like that on the plat map? No, Adam said, a slow smile spreading across his face. Nothing. Then she's got nothing. David confirmed. Her entire legal justification for the violation is built on sand. She's counting on you not knowing the law. Adam now had 3 critical pieces of evidence: the power of his easement, Christina's prior knowledge and interest in it, and the legal unenforceability of the very rule she was using to harass him. He had the what and the how. He still needed the why. Why go to all this trouble? The answer, he suspected, was in that redacted section of the meeting minutes. All he had to do was figure out what was behind that black ink. The answer to the why arrived in a plain brown envelope that Tom Stone left in his mailbox. Inside was a stack of documents Tom had unearthed, not from the county recorder, but through a friend who worked in the state's corporate filings division. The documents were a registration for a recently formed entity, Lakefront Properties LLC. The registration was public record, but what Tom had found was the LLC's confidential operating agreement, obtained through a source who owed him a favor. The agreement detailed a proposal for a $50 million luxury boutique hotel and spa to be built on the far side of Lake Astaire. It was a massive project that would transform the quiet, residential lake into a commercial tourist destination. But the entire project was contingent on one non-negotiable condition: securing exclusive, private access to the lake for hotel guests, including a private marina and beach area. The Heritage Point side of the lake was the only viable location for such an amenity. And there, on the signature page of a memorandum of understanding between Lakefront Properties LLC and a local partner, was the name that made Adam's blood run cold: Christina Scott. She had signed not as HOA president, but in her personal capacity. The agreement stipulated that if she could deliver the necessary easements and development approvals from the Heritage Point HOA by the end of the fiscal year, she would receive a facilitator's fee of $5 million. $5 million! It was no longer a petty power trip. It was a conspiracy to commit fraud on a massive scale. Christina was planning to sell out her entire community, trading their peaceful lakeside lifestyle for a personal fortune. His property, with its controlling easement, was the linchpin of her entire scheme. If she controlled his lot, she controlled the lake. His refusal to be bullied, his insistence on standing his ground over a single chair, was a direct threat to her $5 million payday. The knowledge landed with sickening force. He felt a wave of nausea, followed by a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. She wasn't just a Karen. She was a predator, cloaking her avarice in the guise of community standards. That evening, as Adam was processing the immensity of Christina's scheme, a knock came at his door. It was Mike Johnson, his neighbor, but the friendly, easygoing man he'd met a few weeks ago was gone. In his place was a man pale with anxiety, his hands trembling slightly as he held a folded piece of paper. "Adam, can I talk to you?" he asked, his voice low and strained. "My wife doesn't know I'm here. She's terrified." Adam led him to the porch. Mike sat heavily in a chair, unable to meet his eyes. "After that Zoom meeting, Christina came to see us," he began. "She said the HOA was facing huge potential fines from the county for environmental non-compliance related to lake access. She said that to protect ourselves, every family with a dock needed to purchase a premium lake access certificate." Mike unfolded the paper and handed it to Adam. It was an impressively official-looking document, printed on watermarked paper with a gold foil seal. It was titled County Environmental Compliance and Lake Access Certificate, and it purported to grant the holder immunity from regulatory fines in exchange for a one-time fee. "How much did she charge you for this?" Mike Adam asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Mike swallowed hard, shame and anger warring in his eyes. $3,000. We put it on a credit card. She said if we didn't, the county could lien our property. She showed us a letter from a county official. It looked real. Adam stared at the fraudulent document in his hands. This was a new, horrifying dimension to the scheme. Christina wasn't just trying to defraud a development company. She was actively extorting money from her own neighbors, the very people she was elected to serve. She was creating a paper trail, manufacturing evidence that homeowners were paying the HOA for lake access, which she could then use to bolster her claim that the HOA, not Adam's easement, controlled the lake. It was felony-level wire and mail fraud. "Mike," Adam said, his voice firm but gentle, "this certificate is a fake. The county doesn't issue these. This is part of a much larger scam. You've been defrauded." The color drained completely from Mike's face as the truth sank in. $3,000, he whispered, the sound full of betrayal. "We trusted her." In that moment, Adam's fight became something more. It was no longer just about defending his own property. It was about defending Mike and the dozens of other families Christina was likely victimizing. He now had the motive, the $5 million contract. And he had the method, the sale of fraudulent certificates. He understood, with chilling certainty, that he was not just fighting a corrupt HOA president. He was dismantling a criminal enterprise. Word of Adam's investigation, quiet as he tried to keep it, began to trickle through the neighborhood. Tom Stone's visits to the county office had been noticed. Mike, emboldened by the truth, had started speaking cautiously to a few trusted neighbors. Christina Scott, feeling her control begin to slip, decided to escalate. The next official letter that arrived was not from the management company, but from a law firm, Dewey, Cheatham and Howe, attorneys at law. The letterhead was thick, the language severe. Formal notice of intent to lien. RE delinquent fines and continuing violation at 114 Willow Trace. Dear Mr. Rogers, this firm represents the Heritage Point Homeowners Association. Our records indicate that you have failed to cure the violation detailed in the notice dated June 15th. Consequently, fines have been accumulating at a rate of $25 per day. Your current outstanding balance is $650. This letter serves as formal notice that if the violation is not cured, and all outstanding fines are not paid in full within 30 days, the association will, as per the rights granted in the governing documents, place a continuing lien on your property for the amount of the unpaid charges, including any attorney's fees and costs incurred in this matter. This was the nuclear option. An HOA lien could prevent him from selling or refinancing his home, if left unpaid. In some states, it could even lead to foreclosure. It was a legal cudgel designed to terrify a homeowner into submission. For Adam, it was merely confirmation of Christina's desperation. Simultaneously, she launched a smear campaign. A special president's newsletter appeared in everyone's email inbox. It didn't mention Adam by name, but the target was unmistakable. "It has come to my attention," Christina wrote, "that certain individuals are spreading misinformation and attempting to undermine the authority of our board. One homeowner, new to our community, is pursuing a litigious and selfish agenda that threatens the lake access for all residents. This individual is attempting to use a legal technicality to claim personal control over our community's most precious asset. The board is taking decisive action to protect the rights of the many, against the greed of the few. The effect was immediate. The friendly waves from neighbors stopped. When Adam walked to his mailbox, conversations would cease, and people would turn away. He was being painted as a villain, a wealthy ex-lawyer trying to steal the lake from his neighbors. The irony was galling. Christina, the true thief, had successfully cast him as the enemy. One evening, an older woman who served on the board with Christina approached him as he was getting out of his car. Her name was Eleanor Vance, a retired schoolteacher who had lived in Heritage Point for 30 years. She was the community's moral compass, universally respected for her fairness and common sense. "Mr. Rogers," she said, her expression troubled, "I need a word with you." They stood in his driveway as dusk settled. "I voted against Christina's motion at that hearing," she began. "What she is doing to you is wrong. I know it, and she knows it." "Then why don't you stop her?" Adam asked, more weary than accusatory. "Because she has the votes," Eleanor said with a sigh, "and because she is a master of twisting the narrative. But that's not why I'm here. I know you're investigating her. I know you're a lawyer. I just want to caution you." She looked him directly in the eye. "When you fight back, be careful who gets caught in the crossfire. Christina has spent years weaving a complex web. She does favors. She bends rules for people she wants to keep on her side. If you go after her with a sledgehammer, you could end up hurting good people who are just trying to get by." Her warning was cryptic, but clear. There would be collateral damage. The fight was more complicated than simply exposing a villain. It was a test of his principles. Could he achieve justice for the community without harming some of its innocent members in the process? Eleanor's words hung in the air, a moral challenge that complicated his path to victory. He now knew that winning wasn't enough. He had to win the right way. The Heritage Point annual homeowners meeting was Christina's stage, her yearly coronation. It was held in the multi-purpose room of the local elementary school, a cavernous space that smelled faintly of floor wax and chalk. This year, however, the atmosphere was different. The usual sparse crowd of 30 or so residents had swelled to over 100. Word had spread. People came not for the budget report, but for the showdown. Adam had followed procedure to the letter, submitting a formal request to be added to the agenda under new business. Christina had been forced to accept it, but she had weaponized the rules, allocating him a strict, non-negotiable 5-minute time slot. When Adam entered, he saw Christina at the head table, flanked by the other board members and the HOA's attorney. She looked poised and confident, but a slight tension in her jaw betrayed her anxiety. On the large screen behind her, where a budget pie chart was currently displayed, a digital timer was prominently featured, 0500. The meeting dragged on with procedural doldrums. The treasurer's report, the landscaping committee's update. Finally, Christina's voice rang out. Next on the agenda, we have a homeowner presentation from Mr. Adam Rogers of 114 Willow Trace. Mr. Rogers, you have 5 minutes. Your time begins now. The timer on the screen started its inexorable countdown, 04, 59, 04, 58. Adam walked calmly to the podium, a USB drive in his hand. He didn't look at Christina. He looked at his neighbors. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady and clear, amplified by the microphone. "My name is Adam Rogers. For the past 6 weeks, your HOA president, Missy Scott, has been fining me for placing a chair on my own dock, claiming it violates the CC&Rs. I'm here tonight to tell you why." He inserted the USB drive into the laptop at the podium. The budget chart vanished, replaced by an image of his first document. Time, 4:30. This is Article 8, Section 8.4.2 of our CC&Rs. It's the rule Ms. Scott is using against me. It prohibits structures that materially obstruct the view or vista from any common area. A powerful rule, but as our HOA's own attorney can confirm, a rule that is legally unenforceable in this state, without a legally defined and recorded view corridor on the official plat maps. No such corridor exists. A murmur went through the crowd. The HOA attorney shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Time, 3:30. Adam clicked to the next slide. It was a high-resolution image of the original 1968 subdivision plat map, obtained by Tom Stone from the county archives. A single parcel was highlighted in yellow. "This is the official plat map for Heritage Point. And this," he said, pointing to his highlighted lot, "is my property. What Ms. Scott has failed to mention in her newsletters is that my property contains the primary access easement for this entire community. Legally, every one of you depends on the rights granted by my deed to get to the lake. This isn't a technicality. It is the legal foundation of our community." The murmur grew louder. People were turning to look at their neighbors, their expressions a mixture of confusion and dawning anger. Christina's face was a mask of cold fury. Time 1:55. Adam advanced to the next slide. On the left side was the redacted page from the HOA minutes. On the right was the same page. Unredacted. Eleanor Vance, sitting in the front row, gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. 6 months ago, the board met to discuss sensitive development negotiations. This is what was hidden from you. He pointed to the unredacted text. It details a proposal from a company called Lakefront Properties LLC to build a $50 million hotel on our lake. And it mentions that the success of that project hinged on securing exclusive lake access through our community. The room erupted. Shouts of "what and she never told us" filled the air. Christina banged her gavel. "Order, Mr. Rogers. Your time is nearly up." Time, 0:55. Adam clicked again. The screen now showed a copy of the contract between Christina Scott and Lakefront Properties LLC, with the $5 million facilitator's fee circled in red. "This isn't about my chair," Adam said, his voice rising with controlled power. "It's about Ms. Scott's plan to sell your lake access, our community's crown jewel, to a developer for a $5 million personal payday. My property stood in her way, so she tried to force me out with fake violations and liens." Time, 0:20. For his final slide, he displayed a copy of the fraudulent $3,000 premium lake access certificate she had sold to Mike Johnson, and to build her fraudulent case. She has been extorting money from her own neighbors, selling fake county certificates under threat of legal action. At that moment, the moral dilemma Eleanor had presented him with flashed in his mind. He had one more document on his USB drive, an email showing Christina approving a non-compliant fence for the Pattersons, a beloved elderly couple, in exchange for their public support. Exposing it would prove her pattern of corrupt favors, but it would also subject the Pattersons to fines and the cost of replacing their fence. He looked at the elderly couple sitting in the third row, their faces etched with confusion and fear. He looked at the timer, 00050004. He made his choice. He unplugged the USB drive. "My time is up," he said, stepping back from the podium as the timer hit 0. He didn't need the final document. The room was in utter chaos. The pandemonium that followed Adam's presentation was absolute. Homeowners were on their feet, shouting questions, demanding answers. Christina Scott sat frozen at the head table, her face ashen, her authority evaporating in real time. The HOA's attorney, a man named Henderson, who had clearly been kept in the dark about the fraud, looked at the documents on the screen with an expression of pure horror. He leaned over and whispered frantically to Christina, who shook her head, unable to speak. It was Mike Johnson who brought order to the chaos. He stood on a chair, his voice booming over the din. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in Christina Scott as president. I move to suspend her authority pending a full, independent financial audit. A chorus of second echoed through the room. Christina finally found her voice, a pathetic, reedy sound that was a shadow of her former command. This is out of order. This is not on the agenda. You cannot. The HOA attorney cut her off, standing up to address the furious homeowners. His face was grim. Under the bylaws, a motion can be made from the floor if a quorum is present. A vote can be held. He turned to the board. Given the evidence of potential financial malfeasance and breach of fiduciary duty presented here tonight, I strongly advise the board to allow this vote to proceed. As of this moment, my firm cannot continue to represent the president in this matter due to a clear conflict of interest. He had just publicly fired his own client. The betrayal was the final, devastating blow. The vote was a formality. A sea of hands went up in favor of Christina's removal. When the call came for nays, only one hand, her own, was raised before she seemed to realize the futility and let it drop. Stripped of her power, she slumped in her chair. Then, as the reality of her public humiliation set in, a strange, guttural sob escaped her lips. She gathered her papers with trembling hands and, without another word, fled the room, escorted by a sympathetic-looking school janitor. The reign of Christina Scott had ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. In the days that followed, the community mobilized with stunning efficiency. An interim board was formed with Mike Johnson as its reluctant but capable president. A forensic accounting firm was hired to conduct the audit. The evidence Adam had compiled was turned over to the county's district attorney. The story of the corrupt HOA president and the retired lawyer who took her down became local legend. Adam, for his part, retreated from the spotlight. He had not sought to lead the community, only to protect his peace. He'd done his duty. Now, he just wanted to fish. Weeks turned into a quiet, peaceful summer. The audit confirmed everything Adam had uncovered and more, revealing years of financial mismanagement and self-dealing under Christina's leadership. Federal investigators, alerted by the scale of the development fraud, opened their own case. All the fines she had levied were declared null and void. The money extorted for the fake certificates was cataloged for restitution. Under Mike's leadership, a new spirit of transparency took hold. The bylaws were amended to include term limits for board members and mandatory independent audits, a set of changes informally dubbed the Rogers Rules. One sunny afternoon in August, a special community meeting was held by the lake. Adam, at the board's request, stood before his neighbors. The legal power of the easement on my property is significant, he said, and in the wrong hands. It could be used to harm this community. But I didn't buy this home to be a gatekeeper. He held up a document. This is a formal, permanent license, filed with the county, granting the Heritage Point community irrevocable access to the lake across my easement. Forever. No one will ever be able to threaten your access again. A wave of applause and heartfelt thanks washed over him. He had not only defeated a tyrant, but had also used his power to empower everyone else. He had secured their property values and their way of life. A month later, a final package arrived from Tom Stone, the surveyor. It was a thin file with a note attached. Thought you might be interested in this last piece of the puzzle? Explains a lot. Tom. Inside was a copy of a brittle, Yellowed deed from 1895. It was for a large, 100-acre farm that encompassed all of what was now Heritage Point. The name of the family who owned it was Scott. A second document, a county foreclosure notice from 1932, showed that the Scott family had lost the entire property during the Great Depression. Tom had highlighted a final piece of information, a genealogical record showing that Christina Scott was the great-granddaughter of the man who had lost the land. Adam sat on his dock, the documents in his lap. It was never just about the $5 million. This land, his specific parcel, had been the heart of her family's ancestral home, her obsession, her rage, her relentless and criminal campaign to oust him. It was all rooted in a deep, tragic, and twisted desire to reclaim what she believed was a stolen birthright. It didn't excuse her crimes, but it cast them in a new, more humanly complex light. She wasn't just a monster of greed. She was a ghost, haunted by the losses of a generation long past, trying desperately and destructively to rewrite history. The knowledge settled over him, not with triumph, but with a quiet sense of melancholy. He looked out at the water, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The fight was truly over, its last, deepest secret revealed. He picked up his fishing rod, cast the line into the shimmering water, and finally, truly, felt at peace.